customer's perspective. We speak of solutions, but it's very important to be cognizant of really what is the need, and we've got to tailor our solutions to the need. That's, of course, my biggest takeaway. And I think it was very timely because this morning we started off talking about gaps in solutions, but I think this particular session was also a nice reality check. I just want to take a moment to really thank all of you for tweeting away to glory. You can see the Twitter board, it's buzzing constantly already. There have been a high percentage of people tweeting very insightful perspectives from this event. There is a surprise gift, of course, for the person with the maximum number of tweets or some such criteria. So please do continue tweeting. This, of course, sets the stage for the next event, and it's a panel discussion. And we've been talking about advancements in healthcare. We've been talking about the pace of technology. When Dr. Shetty mentioned about it, it's breakneck, no question. Things that were not curable become curable. Areas that were not reachable become reachable. Data that was not transferable becomes interoperable, so on and so forth. But still, there are numerous gaps, and really it's those gaps that make our lives in the healthcare industry super interesting. It is very, very important to sometimes take a pause and understand how to bridge those gaps. So that's what this next discussion is about. And for that, I would like to first request Dr. Vishal Rao to take the stage. Dr. Vishal Rao. Dr. Vishal Rao is the Chief of Head, Neck, Surgical Oncology and Robotic Surgery at HCG Bangalore. He's a TEDx speaker and inventor of the OM voice prosthesis, a $1 speaking device for throat cancer patients, an innovation that has been considered among the 100 global social innovations across the globe and received wide recognition from BBC, Harvard Business Review, and Forbes. He has more than 13 patents filed for his innovations on medical devices, drugs, techniques, and surgeons, Glasgow recognizing his contributions. And theories. He has been conferred the honorary FRCS by the Royal College of Surgeons, Glasgow, recognizing his contributions. He is the recipient of the Judy Wilkenfield Award for Global Excellence in Tobacco Control in 2017. He is presently editor of Journal of Precision Oncology and has more than 100 national and international publications to his credit. I think we've got the best person possible for facilitating the next conversation. I will leave the stage to him and bring the panels on board.
Very big crux in healthcare. And I quite agree with that I think everything is becoming a concern. I was talking to Yogan Ras today morning, and I was telling him I'm giving a talk next week on artificial intelligence versus natural stupidity. How are we going to bridge the gap? It's a growing concern. Everything in healthcare is coming to be a growing concern. Ranjan earlier spoke about cost being one of the biggest concerns which India always talks about. It's quite true, because even cemeteries have raised their burial costs owing to the cost of living. It's the paradox. So everybody is actually talking about cost today. So we've got a very interesting panel coming up now. And I'm just going to invite all the panelists before this. If you can, there's another slide about all the panelists. Can they just put it up? What? Okay, I can do that. I'm just going to introduce each of our panelists here. We have Daniel Mason. Can you come on the stage, Daniel? We have Hiroyuki Tsutsumi. Anyway, any of these places. We have Dr. Chandrika Kambam, and we have Dr. Chandil Kumar. I have four interesting. You can choose any place you like. I've been asked to sit in the middle to negotiate. So I'm going to, before we start the panel and I introduce all of them, I think just going to give you a little brief introduction. Actually, I just wanted to This panel is about 1 hour. We're actually having 2 rounds of discussion. Can we have these front screens on so that the panelists can see some of the questions? Okay. So we actually plan to have 2 rounds of discussions, one on identifying which are the healthcare gaps, and then about how do we bridge them. These are the 2 parts that we're going to do, and we're going to keep the last part for audience interaction. I actually brought up this to start an introductory story to you all about telling about who my panelists are, because I actually, when I went through all of them, I found it very interesting, and I came across a very interesting story which I'm going to share. So I don't know how many of you all have heard this. It's a very interesting one about a monk who was in the forest walking with 2 of his disciples, and he decided to stop because they had to cross a lake. So the senior most monk sits, meditates, and walks across water. Seeing this, the next monk gets fascinated, again sits down, meditates a little longer, and this time walks across water. So the junior most monk, the disciple, seeing both of them, is very inspired, and he says that he should pull this off. Decides to meditate much longer, and then when he puts his first step into the water, drowns. So the other 2 monks on the other side of the lake look at him and say, I think we need to tell him where the stones are. So here are 4 of my panelists who are going to tell us where the stones are, so that we don't walk on water. Okay, so I've got each of their CVs here. This is just for your reference. Daniel Mason is the Vice Chairman and Managing Director for the Indian Subcontinent of Philips. We have Hiroyuki, who's the Chief of Philips Japan and a member of the Executive Committee of Royal Philips. We have Chandrika here with me, who is the VP Clinical Services for Columbia Asia at Bangalore. And Chandil Kumar, Dr. Chandil, who is the CEO of RX Enablers. So these are my 4 esteemed panelists, and we're going to get the ball rolling with this. So like I told you all, the round 1 is going to be about addressing the healthcare gaps, and I'm going to start with Daniel to talk about. I've posed a few questions, Daniel, here. So basically what I wanted you all to talk about was, what are your views about the current challenges that we need to address, elaborate a few about what role does research play in Philips ecosystem, and maybe talking about identifying gaps using technology or data in the unconventional settings. I think this would be very pertaining to all the 3 points that are interesting for you and for the audience here.
Sure. Thank you very much. Really appreciate. So good morning to everybody. What a pleasure to be here, and our 5th consecutive Philips Healthcare Digital Conclave. So this is great. I think it speaks a lot about our interest to collaborate and work together for pushing healthcare, forward. And it's an honor to be with such a great panel and physicians and my buddy Hiro here. So it's great to be here. I thought about this, and I have a couple ideas I wanted to throw there to start this discussion, right? From a challenge standpoint, I thought that everything that I'm saying right here, to me, starts in the primary care right now in the rural area, okay? So I just wanted to let you know about that. I live in India for the past 2 years. I'm in the Delhi area, and I come from Latin America, and I can tell you that there's a lot of similarities, and we can drive, 1.5, 2 hours away from the big cities, a completely different, setting, right? So it's important to me that we look into this space of the rural India. And to me, it starts with awareness, okay? I think awareness, as I get to know more about and learn about India and the challenges and the opportunities, which is really what research is about to me, is understanding, at the very end, what's happening. I think awareness plays a huge role, awareness of the diseases, awareness of the existence of the treatment itself, the availability. Ayushman Bharat came about with more vigor recently, and yet I talk to a lot of customers that tell me that patients don't know about it. They don't know that they are covered, that they have the ability, they have those 5 lakhs per family to be able to be covered. So that's one. The second thing is, it's another one that I observed that is quite different from my experiences any other place in the world that I've worked with, which is this lack of a methodology, a referral, a system that works in place, because it may not be something that you think about it because the way you are treated. But even, you know, I grew up in Brazil, and you go to smaller towns, and I had situations with my own family. It's usually, you know, maybe the pharmacist in Brazil that was kind of like your doctor to tell you what to do, right? No disrespect to the pharmacist, right? But I'm saying that there's always, I know someone, and he or she will be able to tell you what to do. That person recommends you to someone, and suddenly, next thing you know, there's a lot of things happening, and there's not a standardized, you know, some process behind how to take treatment forward. And if you just think about it, without that, it's quite complicated to start thinking about treating something, right? So that's the second part that I throw. We're a company of innovation historically, right? We've been transforming, innovating ourselves, reinventing ourselves. But if you think of, you know, infrastructure is a challenge in India, absolutely. Lack of physicians, nurses, training, absolutely. But just looking at that alone, it's not going to help unless you start thinking about this system that I'm talking, the systematic approach. I want to make sure I stay on my time here because
I'm the timekeeper. I'm the surgeon and the timekeeper.
Fair enough. So the role of research, what I want to say is this. There is a word that we use a lot in Philips, which is called Gemba. And my friend on my right here knows that quite well. It comes from the Lean principle and you know, in Toyota, in Japan. And Gemba means know where, you know, where the action and the value is being created. So it's not going to be me sitting in the Delhi Gurgaon that we're going to be understanding what the issues are. So we really have to go to Gemba, to go to see what happens, to go to the sub-centers, to the healthcare, the primary healthcare centers. We do that. We visit those places. We see those things. And that's how we start coming up with ideas. To me, research is about identifying unmet needs. And unmet needs only happens when you really go and you take a look at that. And then the second part to me, is also this idea of a care pathway that we discussed. To diagnose without being able to do something about it, it's just creating more problems. So we have to find a way as an organization, it's our responsibility always to bring that down all the way to the treatment. But you know, you can't just say, oh, I have a great cath lab and I can detect if you have a coronary block, and then what? You know, what if it's a surgery? What if it's, or I have a mammography unit, I can tell you, somebody has a nodule. And then you just, put this person in agony because they don't know if it's cancer or not, and are you going to be able to do a biopsy? Can you do, you're going to need, radiotherapy, what kind of treatment you need, surgery. So you have to think about the experience of the patient, the experience of the staff, and yes, lower cost, affordability, and all of that is important. But if we just think about, I'm going to make a less expensive type of product, I'm not necessarily solving the problem, right? So that's a little bit of what I thought about that. Just the last question regarding the other means and methods.
For data, how to improve data reliability?
Sure.
Because I think India, the quality data is a very big issue. And I'm saying this must be the same problem even in the West, because many of the times because of liability issues, because of this, you don't get genuine data. So how do we actually look at non-homogeneity of this kind of a data landscape, and what would you do to bridge that?
Yeah, I think that was mentioned before by our guests, other members and the speakers. It is, to me, as I look, the more I look about how we can make a difference in India, as Philips India organization, I think about how do we collect this data and leverage the community centers, the smaller towns, how can we go about, having an impact in those places, collecting that. Yes, the notion of a hub and spoke type of model, it's wonderful, it works to be able to leverage the expertise in the hub and reach out to double spokes to do things like that as you start with screening campaigns, creating, jobs to ASHA workers, to different folks, all the way to the end with affordable devices that can connect, and get those preliminary data. We have tons of examples. I can share with you one in the mobile obstetrics area, an application that we have. We can talk about how we can help reduce mortality rates for women and kids and babies as well. So to me, you collect those data and you bring in, then you have this amazing group of customers and the PIC team that do a lot of work in creating those algorithms that can come back and provide insights.
A lot of our technologies are data-driven. A lot of our technologies want data, but the problem is with the source of the data. So would it make more sense for you to work with governments, corporations, integrate together? What would be the best model for all of us to learn from here?
Look, I've actually had this question asked to me a few years ago when I was in Brazil, and I thought hard about this, and then companies in general, they don't necessarily play together too well. And I think this idea of interoperability is a pretty big deal. And I see a lot of organizations coming in and trying to protect data, et cetera. That goes against what I think the solution is. So for that, I think there is a role, a very important role that the government has to play, as well as with the industry, to together create those standards. But that means that we have to stand with the principles. You know, Philips is a purpose-driven company. Yes, we are a public company and we have to generate profits for our shareholders. But before that, we have, to achieve, to improve the lives of 3 billion people by year, 2030.
Thank you.
We have to do the right things as well. So it's possible to generate value for shareholders and to do the right things for people. And I think that space of interoperability and to do this, we should play together with governments and find a solution.
Thank you, Daniel. We'll move on to, is it moving? Okay, I'm sorry. We'll move on to Hiroyuki now. He's the chief of Philips in Japan and a member of the executive committee. Hiroyuki, over to you. I think if you can address a few of these questions, you can see them on the screen there also. On what are your views and experiences that the current challenges are, and if you can elaborate on IT and AI challenges that are faced in the global context. And again, highlight a little bit about data reliability and others.
Okay. So anyways, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Doctor. So I think the same kind of mind I'm not having at this time. Actually, a data-oriented approach, of course, we should do. So, but how much secure the data at this time? I think that people are now gathering the data. That's as a number one priority at this time, even in Japan or in the worldwide, I guess. So, but what purpose is when I use data? Why we need some AI? For what solution we may create based upon whole data, right? Not only for analytics, I think we need to create some solution. So then I think IT, data, or even some probably, analytics, AI, I think we really think about more and more, especially from, viewpoint from a patient or some people's mind. So then in Japan, I think we have some lots of, challenges at this time, not only for AI or IT integration. I think everybody has now very much a silo approach. Even the hospital, doctor has a silo mind. Each vendor like us, we have some own business model. So sometimes very much silo approach we're not doing. So then everybody has a data. Everybody say same kind of things. But how we can get together to do that, right? Interoperability, how we can connect each other. How we can define some real connected care in the healthcare solutions. So then what kinds of benefit or value creation we can do, or everybody can do that. So such kind of some probably idea or some whole goal, some area we are missing a lot. So then back to maybe IT or data or something else, like Japan. Here's a kind of some real story. We have some, small island, not like India, that's a big country. So even Hokkaido, that's the northern part of some, or the Japan, we have some, hospital, of course, a clinic, and we have some data. We have some local behavior, local culture over there. But the southern island, like Okinawa, that's a part of some, small island in Japan, in the southern part, they have some typical traditional culture and behaviors over there. Even some food, totally different. Same as probably India northern part and the southern part, right? So then each guy can get some data, right? So but they have data. Okay, we want to analyze together to do that. So but I think general analytics, general data gathering, that's okay at this time. But how we can see each personal support, personal care, how we can deploy that. So I think that this kind of data migration or integration comes to just or general information for the AI. We can provide that. No personal, no area-oriented approach. We cannot do that. So that's a big headache at this time.
Hiro, I would want to ask you one more question here. In India, we face this often that we have people who generate data, like me and you, who are using our cell phones, who are talking, we are generating data every day. And there's a big group that does not generate data. Now, as technology experts, when you all innovate a solution, how do you discriminate this and how do you actually bridge this gap of creating a solution for somebody who does not create data, using the data that you already have? I would want you to highlight that.
Yeah, actually, I think probably then what purposes we may use this data, right? That's very much important. So then, as I mentioned, that's general purposes, that's okay, that's a perfect situation. But each personal usage, if patient requested to us, how we can reply back, right? So then such customer analytics under some government level, that's common platform or common solution creation. That's we really need at this time. So that's a kind of some big gap at this time in Japan, maybe in the worldwide, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to Dr. Chandil. If you could share your views. So we are asking you about experiences that you are looking at in the current challenges as a doctor, and how would you like to looking at these gaps beyond just hospitals? What is your vision of these gaps?
Thank you, Dr. Vishal, and very good morning to all of you. I think that's a very pertinent question. As much as I'm a doctor, I'm also a technology enthusiast. I started my career way back in 2000 working in a primary health center about 100 kilometers from Bangalore. I still find the realities of life so relevant to the conversations that happen in the morning on the stage. We are talking of availability and accessibility at one front, which is more of population health, and to me, a little bit of an extension to population health informatics. At the same time, as somebody who could get personalized care, we spoke about antiplatelets, we spoke about aspirin dosage to the extent of 1 milligram going up and down. I think that's the paradox what we are today facing in, and that's precisely the challenge today. We look at a national level or at an international level, how do we allocate the resources, or at a cellular level, like a practicing physician like me, what do I do with my expertise, energy, where do I focus it on? And that is actually a question which all of us need to ponder, and I think that's a gap which is very difficult to bridge. We'll have this in the imminent future, a challenging question, not only from a resource perspective, but also from a decision-making perspective. We know a lot of patients need better care, and what are we doing in that aspiration in terms of our own ecosystem that exists and our own beliefs, our own exposure, our own expertise? Is that incongruent with what is ideal? And to that extent, I think the very word ideal is very relative. What is ideal in Western context is not ideal in an Indian context, and what is ideal in a tertiary care hospital like Manipal is very different from a care setting like a clinic where I practice. And I think that's something which we need to equitably address to the patient population as practitioners of medicine. And as technology enthusiasts, how can we bridge this gap is, I think, the connotation for today's discussion.
Chandil, I'll add a question to you. Now here we have startups, we have big corporations, we have a mix of innovators, technocrats. I'm asking you from a medical perspective, if you have to give them a message, there is pockets of hospitals, there are pockets of bigger things. They all would want to look at relevant problems, correct? Because that's where they are able to offer customized solutions. How are they able to put this together? How do they identify these gaps? Where is it that they should be focusing on these gaps? Should it be in corporations? Should it be with government? Should it be with people like you? Who are the people they should be reaching out to?
I think the healthcare of the future is beyond the hospitals. As much as we know, hospitals are the torchbearers of healthcare today, and most of the care settings, the healthcare is going to go beyond the gates of the hospitals. It's actually started where healthcare begins, even at a primordial prevention level. We had Dr. Ranjan's talk about the mosquitoes and the dengue, which is so relevant to healthcare, and even in fact healthcare technology. Is there a way we can sense which are In fact, in the West, we have heat maps which shows the density of mosquitoes prevalence in a particular geography. Can we look at that something similar? I think it starts from the home. I have my father who is a diabetic for the last 20 years, and I have utterly failed to use technology to make it more relevant to practice, the medicine with him. I wanted him to keep a log on his mobile to say what time has he taken medicine. So can we look at the startups to see where we can engage the patients more relevantly, not necessarily with a doctor-patient, but maybe a patient who can use his time for engagement with the technology which can be accessed by the doctors for a better care delivery. That's one setting for sure. Another area which we are looking at is post-hospital rehab, which I think is a big story in itself to be helpful in hastening the process of recovery for post-neurological and cardiological disorders. Hospitals are perfectly fine when it comes to acute care. What happens after that? Is there a fixed methodology by which we can do a natural healing process with less of, I think, prescription medicine in place? And how can we as individuals take care of our own health? I think that's something which is a big platform for startups here. Personal health to be addressed by the person himself. Healthcare is not only the responsibility of the government, it's not only the responsibility of the doctors. I think we as an individual, in whatever capacity we are responsible for our own selves. That, I think, is the platform which is open.
I'll close with one last question to you because it's a very interesting discussion. Tell us about personalized care and precision medicine. A lot of us are talking about this. Where do you see our current gaps are here? In personalized and precision medicine, where is our gaps? Because that's a lot of people here would want to build technologies for the future. So where do you identify the gaps?
I think that's a very interesting question, and I think it's a very open-ended one as well. Personalized would mean from 0 to 1. So in most, for me, it would start off beginning with as frugal as your weight management, as your cholesterol levels, and your allergies, to what is ideal for you. How much should you really work out? How much should you really, have your mental health in place? I think that's another area which is, for me, the big window to work on personal health.
Thank you. I'll move on to Dr. Chandrika now. She'll have the last word in this session. So Dr. Chandrika is an administrator. She's the vice president of the clinical services. So she has a blend of clinical and administrative services coming together. So if you could elaborate some of the topics that we discussed, about bridging, identifying gaps in public versus government versus private sectors. How are you all identifying these gaps? And from your perspective, what are the biggest challenges?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Philips, for organizing this. And I've been coming to Philips Conclave for since the time they started this. What I liked is being consistent. We, as an acute care hospital provider, we do work with many vendors and many such technology partners. But this initiative of Philips is very unique, and I congratulate the Philips team for organizing this and keep it going. And it really helps all of us coming together. Now, coming to the bridging the gap, being a physician, I've been trained in India in one of the places called Bellary. I think the Bellary became very famous because of the Reddy brothers, but you might not know that it is one of the very not so economically forward area other than mining. I studied in that medical college, then I went to Bronx, New York, which is again an area which I think not many people would like to go. So I've been trained in many such areas which are very, very backward, and now coming back to India and working in corporate hospital. I'll tell you this, the Bellary, I just went back after 20 years. It's still the same. Medical college is still the same. No change in the way they're delivering care to the people in that district. And 20 years from then to now, Bangalore is buzzing with hospitals. There was probably one Malya hospital, that was the first corporate hospital in Bangalore, and today we have probably 10 or 15 of them serving the same population. So the gap starts with the infrastructure. So there's so much of gap in the infrastructure. And obviously, when the infrastructure is concentrated in the urban areas, the skilled manpower who are there to deliver this care gets concentrated in the urban areas as well, because there is no infrastructure for a doctor to go and practice in tier 2 and 3 cities. What will a trained surgeon like Dr. Vishal will do in a place like Hubli or Dharwad, where there is hardly any infrastructure for them to do any good work? So there comes the problem. It starts with infrastructure, then it starts with the skilled manpower, it starts with the medical colleges, the number of medical colleges. So recently I was in FICCI HEAL conference, where the Niti Aayog people were questioning the private players and vendors, saying, every year we generate so many medical graduates, and the private players take away 70% of them. So as a government provider, and government which is providing more healthcare facility to the rural areas, they are left with only 30% of what they train year on year. So what are you doing to bridge the gap, was the question that was asked for us. So which is again very relevant. And so on, like the other is gap is on the affordability. First is accessibility, the second is affordability. 82% of urban population and 87% of rural population have no cover, no third-party payer. So that means they have to pay for their services themselves, that is out-of-pocket expenses. And the cost has escalated anywhere from 50% to 250% over the last 10 years. What was costing like $5,000 10 years, today it costs about 25,000 rupees. Whereas the amount of money that the people earn per person has not changed much. Though there are a lot of opportunities for people to come to urban to work, the amount of payment that we do per person is not much. So probably many of them, like in the BPO sector or in the startup companies, when they work at the entry level, they are paid 25 to 30,000 rupees. Which is nothing. When a dengue patient gets admitted in our hospital, the average bill per patient per day is that much. So you can imagine the gap of affordability of care. So there are a lot of gap in the payment, in the way we kind of pay for the services. And the last one is accountability. So the 3 A's in the gap is accessibility, affordability, and accountability. Today, to what body are we accountable for? Is there a government agency which is overseeing the functioning of the hospitals? Are they delivering the right care? Are they delivering at the right cost? Is what they're doing is the right thing for the patient? Nobody is governing that. We are just self-regulating ourselves. Though there are bodies which accreditate, like NABH, and there is a medical council which has been now replaced with National Medical Council, but still there is a long way to go to overseeing the functioning of each and every hospital. So these are majorly the gaps that we have currently in the system. And probably in the next round, I will also elaborate on the solutions that the government is looking at and various other things that are happening currently, which definitely throws a ray of hope and also has a lot of opportunities for us to look into. But currently, these are definitely the challenges.
So just to round up this this particular session, the first aspect of it, I think the one thing that completely highlights, I think, is from data accountability to he talking about going and looking beyond hospitals to identify problems where solutions are there, which can be like what Raz said in the first part. It could be much before you reach the hospital to much beyond beyond the hospital. And I think I'll just at this point point to a very interesting article that came sometime back in the Lancet. It was called the Cancer Moonshot. Which was about the government, US, funding the Blue Ribbon Panel with the state-of-the-art technologies to solve cancer. And it was a very interesting article that talked about the 5 important points that are going to change the surface of cancer through use of interesting technologies, which was precision medicine, personalized medicine, big data, immunotherapy, and personalized. So these 5 points were given the highlights. But the interesting part was an article came out in the subsequent edition about a cancer ground shot, which actually talked about before you hit the moon shot, let's solve the ground problems. And let's look at before you invest too much, find out how much lives are you going to save by doing what you're going to invest in. And that's the bigger question I think this panel was trying to answer. So we'll go to the next part, which is each one of these panelists here have very beautifully elaborated on some of the gaps. I would like to hear from each one of you in the same order. How are you going to solve these gaps? What are the things that, for example, your own organizations are doing to solve these gaps? And I think I'll start with Daniel again. I think some of the key points I've asked here is funding innovations in healthcare gaps, the Philips way, and how do you solve some of these common issues for a common man? What are the things that you could do? How is Philips thinking on these lines?
Sure. I think you mentioned, training programs for designing health thinking and promote innovation, and this is a forum with a lot of great ideas and people thinking of different solutions. I may sound like I'm kind of beating a dead horse a little bit here, but I will say it again because I think that we at times overthink things. Doctor said in the opening that there are too many solutions looking for problems. In Philips, we co-create, this notion of innovation in a center, a lab where we have our scientists and things like that. This doesn't exist, right? I mean, this is really a co-creation. We're working together with our partners to truly understand. So that's very important. But I go back about this. There are a lot of solutions, and then people are going out there, let me find a problem. I can't emphasize that enough. And we face from the same disease time and time again, and we discuss that internally a lot. We guide ourselves with the quadruple aim, knowing that quadruple aim has to be adapted based on the needs of the different places that you are. So when we talk about this notion of going to Gamba and really understanding the, and the last mile what's happening, that's very important for us as an organization. And all the development of new products and solutions in Philips has to pass this test of a quadruple aim under a setting that we co-create and we work with our partners. So I think that's important. And I want to say that we should take more risks. We should have more pilots. We should do more tests of things, and that's what we try to do, is small little things. And throughout the day, you will see some innovations outside and others that we're working on. And we have, 4 times the number of things in the pipeline to design to work with you. We will love to welcome all of you with your ideas. But here's the thing, right? That it normally, the gates that they don't pass, the solutions. So in terms of how do you solve this? It has to be solving a real problem. There's no notion of value proposition. It's not a small thing. You have to understand what is the value proposition, which means what's the problem you're solving. And you don't know that until you're really on the ground floor trying to understand what the problem is. And as the doctor said, it could be better roads. And here you are trying to come up with something that is so much more complex. So that's one. The second part is fair. We are a purpose company, and we want to improve. We are improving the lives of people, and we do that. But we sacrifice on profitability. We do. Just so you know, in our organization, the Indian area that I'm responsible for, the Subcontinent, it's one of the lowest in profitability for Philips in the world. Okay, but we're here for the long term, and that's what we need to think about it. And it's not absolute profitability, but it's the volume that we can gather, because every little thing that we can do, we have to, figure out a way to recover the investments, and all of us. Right. And we have to do that. But it's the absolute. And so every little profit here and there, small as it is, adds up in our populations. And the last thing I was going to say is, I'm 100%, supportive of partnerships. None of this can be done without partnerships. We have to work together. Even if we compete against each other, because there are companies out there that we compete, we are open arms, looking for ways to solve these big problems together.
Thank you, Hiro, can you elaborate?
Yeah, actually, I fully agree with Daniel. I think we need to change more and more. For example, we say customers first, right? The customer meaning, of course, doctors and the hospitals, clinic, and also patient and the people, everything, right? So then sometimes probably, solution meaning, doctor-oriented or hospital-oriented approach. We really think about the more wide view, for example, community-oriented approach, how we can create community together to do that, based upon healthcare solutions. Solution meaning two areas. One is for problem solving. I think customer has a problem, how we can settle down whole issues. That's one of the solution. The other thing, solution meaning value creation, right? For everybody, including Philips, including you, including everybody. So then the solution approach more accelerates such kind of deployment. That's mandatory things. However, not silo approach. I think a standard model creation comes to one of the important, not only for India, not only for Japan, in the global wise. Also, our side, more collaborate with every partner's ecosystem, that comes to also the important. In Japan, we've already deployed more than 60 ecosystem partners deployment from a different angle industries, like a logistics company, or construction company, housing company, also software company like this, including a city government aligned together to do that at this time. So then the ecosystem acceleration comes to a real solution creation, real solution meaning one of the standard model, also some part of the customization based upon some data or something.
Hiro, can you tell us about how are you using some of these ecosystems to improve data reliability?
Yes. So that's why I think just pick up some secure data, value data for what purpose we may think about that. For example, community deployment, right? What data we really need, not personal data, just a general data comes to maybe okay. But for each guy's healthcare support, I think more define, more analyze each person's data, right? It depends on anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll quickly move on to Dr. Chandil Kumar. I wanted to have more interaction with the audience, so I thought we can round up with 3 minutes each in this session. So if you can tell us about frugal innovations and how can we bridge some of these gaps from the Indian perspective.
Yeah, I'll take off from where Hiro said. He said about value creation. I will add a little bit more of English language into it. It has to be shared value creation. I think all players need to come in on to contribute what is their bet. We did an experiment about 5 years back where we tracked the gestational diabetes in the corporation BBMP hospitals using a small Nokia non-smartphone. And we were amazed to get almost about 2,000 women who were tracked for a period of 6 months to track if they were actually getting into, if they were prone to get into gestational diabetes or not. And that was a discovery for us to understand it's not only technology, it's also about how people get to understand the technology and see value in what we are doing. So I think that's frugal innovation for us. And I think there are a lot more things we can do in the similar space and understanding. And this had various stakeholders. We had governmental hospitals, which we thought was the last of our interested party to do an experiment of that. And we were surprised to find that they were more than happy and cooperative. And these women were ones who were earning less than 50 rupees a day, the people who go to this kind of hospitals. And they were so enthusiastic to get enrolled on the program. And this involved engineers who had never worked on healthcare before, and it involved technologists, doctors, almost about 6, 7 of us who tried to bring this experiment. And we had an amazing insight into how innovation can actually lead us back to understand where it goes. And I think that's a way to have everybody on the stage to involve towards frugal innovation.
Have you as a company tried collaborating with the government to get some data sets to do some of these frugal innovations, and how is this ecosystem?
Yes, there are many instances where the government of India and the government of Karnataka have associated with us. In fact, the National Health Portal was something which gave a lot of data for us to do a modeling for us to track the ambulances in case of emergency and the door-to-balloon alliance. So we've been partially successful. Though a lot needs to be done in validating and cleaning the data. I think that is where interoperability will come into play. I think as also the chairman of Vishal Rao, I think the lot that needs to be done in kind of sanitizing the data and making it more meaningful. But yes, we are on the road, but a lot of miles has to be covered before we
And quickly, one last, what is your message for audience to use problems from India so that we don't solve problems for California, but for Indians?
Oh, you have picked a raw nerve on my side. I always used to say, what would happen if I was a left-handed cardiac surgeon? I think most of the equipment what we get is a right-handed equipment which is manufactured either in the Europe or the US, and that comes to us. So, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of variation that can be brought in, and there are enough problems which are universal as such. The ecosystem, the macro environment is more or less the same. It's a micro environment which varies. And as it comes to the deliberation since morning, it's the dollar and the rupee which needs to be worked out towards this innovation. I think there's enough for us to work on that.
Thank you. Chandrika, from your side, you had some very interesting perspectives about private versus public. How are you going to look at, from your side, some of these solutions?
Yes, there's a lot of work that is happening. Actually, to sum it up, it is definitely the private-public partnership. All of us coming together to a common cause is very important, and collaborating and interoperability using technology to drive this to the last mile, and looking at interoperability of the technology is very important.
Chandrika, I'll stop you at this moment to ask you a suggestion. Is it practical? Is it feasible? Is it cost effective? Like I'm just saying, Ayushman Bharat has come. Do you think Columbia Asia would be able to embrace Ayushman Bharat and run the show? How easy is this kind of a PPP model? While we all talk about it, what exactly is the mantra for PPP to survive?
Yes, definitely it is not easy, because in healthcare, it is very difficult that technology companies think that we can develop a unicorn overnight. It is not possible, because any technology that has to be implemented in healthcare requires a lot of testing, sensitivity, specificity, and then going to the last mile, having the acceptability of the doctors. It is a very Herculean task. I've been working with many technology and startup companies over the last 5 to 6 years and implemented many of them, but many of them did not see the day of the light, only because everybody is worried about return on investment. Especially when I put a ECG monitor, which is AI-enabled ECG machine at a periphery, like in a village. The idea was to pick up an ST elevation MI and help the end user, who is just a midwife or a nurse, to identify, saying that yes, this is a potential patient who has a problem. Please transfer this patient to the nearest hospital. That was the idea. But the thought process at the end of the day is, what am I going to get out of this ECG machine? How many ECGs was done? Did I get an ROI? How fast can I get an ROI? It doesn't work like that to a great extent. And from the studies, what we have seen, if you have reserved 25% of your bets for schemes like Ayushman Bharat, in order to give same amount of profit to your investors, you have to improve your operational efficiency by 20 to 30%. You have to improve whatever is your baseline today, you have to improve it by 20 to 30% in your operational efficiency. You have to cut down your manpower cost by 20 to 30%. From doctor cost and manpower cost, in order to give the same amount of profitability to your investors. At the same time, you serve the population with Ayushman Bharat type of schemes without affecting the outcomes. So how do you bridge this?
Because
the
government is more focused on numbers and we are focused on quality. So how do you bridge this gap? I'm giving you more difficult questions.
Correct. It is difficult. So one of the things that we have to work is getting the clinical decision support system into this into our EMR. Today, the thought process is many of them, especially working with doctors, they say that, oh, all patients are different. I cannot follow standard treatment guidelines. And the variability that you do from patient to patient is enormous, and there is enormous amount of wastage in the system which has to be eliminated. So that can be eliminated by putting through very robust systems in place which are very transparent and which will guide the end user step by step on how we can reduce the deviations. So it is not very different managing a dengue patient, managing an MI patient, managing many of the elective cases. cases, as long as it is not something like a trauma where you cannot predict what the amount of trauma is or the amount of extension of damage that has caused in a patient. Many things are very, very systematic and can be predicted. And especially if it is in elective cases. So we have to reduce that variability in the system and eliminate waste. And believe me, if you eliminate waste, we can get to that operational efficiency.
So we'll have people thinking about elimination now, on filtering data there. So I think with this, can we just quickly round up with a one-liner message from all of you? I think I'll just have one single thing to say. I think every single panelist here is emphasizing about value creation more than wealth creation. And I think that's a very, very important message here, that Philips, I think the topmost senior officers here are emphasizing on value creation and not just wealth creation. I think that's a very important message. I'm going to close from my side with one note and open it to the audience. A very interesting thing which one of my mentors told me, former Chief Justice of India, Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya. I think I'm going to quote him with a lot of relevance here. He told me that GDP is a very limited way of assessing progress. Because if you have to run this country only on the numbers of GDP, you better give this country to smugglers. They'll run it better than politicians. You know, and he gave me a very beautiful example. He said that if 3 doctors every day go walking to the hospital, the GDP is low. If the same 3 doctors take a car and go to the hospital, the GDP is better. And if the same 3 doctors on the way to the hospital die in an accident, the GDP is the best. So he said, don't get excited about only looking at GDP. Sometimes it's the wrong way to assess progress. So I'll leave you all with these notes, and I'll request each one of you to give a quick one-liner conclusion from your side, and then we'll open it to the audience. Yeah, you can start. Okay. Just one message that you want to give to the audience at the end of the session.
All right. So my message is pretty simple. I'll piggyback on Dr. Chandrika's message, what you just said on PPP. We believe in PPP as well. You know, I talked about the system itself and some structural, improvements that has to be made. But look, we got to start somewhere. We've got to do things, until the infrastructure is available, and do our part on that with the physicians' availability in the small towns and all that. But meanwhile, I'll tell you this: we are looking for great partners to work with in PPPs. We've done over 90 PPPs. And we did 36 alone last year, and we're not the experts, but we believe that we have learned over a period of time how to make it operational and understand. And to your point, the efficiency and the operations is critical. We've been working with partners and learning little by little. So we have some areas of expertise that we can bring to the table, partnering with physicians with other ideas to make it work. Is one of our biggest strategic pillars, and I welcome everybody with ideas, and even Dr. Chandrika, I'd love to talk to you and have a cup of coffee later, because we can be great partners.
Thank you. Hiro, any quick messages?
Yes, actually, I really enjoyed some discussion. I think my simple message, I think let's create real value-added solution with real data, not the silo data, not non-valued solution creation together.
Thank you. Thank you. Chandil?
Connected healthcare is the future and perhaps a panacea. Please contribute by participation.
Thank you.
My message is definitely there is a lot of data out there. We know what is the problem. So the senior monks and the policymakers have shown us where the stones are. Now it is our time to step on it and start walking on those stones. And if you still ignore it and start walking on the water, and definitely we will drown. So let us all come together and partner and try and see how to bridge the gap. First on accessibility, then on the accountability and affordability.
Thank you. Thank you. Any quick questions from the audience? We have another 5 more minutes. Yes, sir, please. How good is your voice? Can you scream? Till the mic comes.
I'll extend a topic that Dr. Chandrika mentioned about, and you also said about value creation instead of just going after the wealth part. While in the last few months I have spoken to 50, 100 doctors, and I'll be politically correct, a lot of people have told me that getting money from doctors to pay for the service is a challenge. Given that startups, they do not have deep pockets, and when they look for commercialization, my question is, what are the smarter ways in which they could attain commercialization to gain scale, but at the same time, given that healthcare, has that philanthropic aspect. So I have worked in.
Whom are you directing this question to?
To Dr. Chandrika or anyone else who would want to.
So this is the complex question. Doctor himself is complex, but I'll leave it to her to answer this. Huh?
The question is what?
The question is how to uncomplicate a doctor. I think that's what he said. Huh?
No, that requires a next.
Because you can't change pockets, you can't make it deep or shallow. So there's something else that you have to do there.
So for startups, how do we look at the commercialization?
Yeah, that is a difficult one, because, and also what happens in the healthcare setup is each startup comes up with their own solution, which solves only a part of the problem. And getting doctors to use so many solutions is also very difficult, because they become technology fatigue. So I cannot expect them to see one solution for ICU patients, one solution for OPD patients. It is difficult. I think getting it interoperability, that is trying to be able to plug into the existing system. For an end user, it has to be just one system that they look at. You can have hundreds of systems running at the back end. So that is one way to increase the adoptability. So when you increase the adoptability, obviously then they start using it better, and you can look at a better ROI on those things. So there are many solutions right now. They're also giving it for free. So it is very difficult to compete in that environment.
Daniel, anything that you would want to add to this?
Mine is quick, just a quick question. Nice to meet you first, and thank you for the question. There is a gentleman right in front of you, sitting right there with the gray jacket. And this gentleman, we have an organization in the company, we're always looking for great ideas as well. And we help you try to understand what I mentioned earlier about the value proposition, how to scale, to make it a business out of it, to do different things. So if the idea is solid and it works, I will fund it, okay? We'll work on that. But talk to this gentleman right here, we'll make it work. Talk to this gentleman.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, the gentleman, yes.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Rajendran. I am coming from aerospace background, and also I worked making the paramedical staff to come up to the standard of the medical practitioner who are qualified, in line with Government of India thinking. This is my question.
I think he's suggesting Philips Medical School, something that gets BA to MBBS and kind of does a bridge course. I think something revolutionary. But any
Vishal, I'll take that question. Actually, I think there was the understanding of that was not very well put forward. I think there was a gap in the understanding between what government wanted and what the doctors thought of this bridge course. So that will be well received. So basically, they were looking at in the lines of developing nurse practitioners type of a profile, which is existing in many of the developed countries. So I think that is a welcome thought, and I think many of the hospitals will definitely take part in that. Another initiative which the government has proposed is right now the concept of medical school and training is a single entity. That means if I decide to do a medical college, I have to have everything, starting from medical college to hospital to all the training faculty. But what they have suggested now is a collaborative effort. So that means a person can have a he can have a college, he does not have to have a hospital. He can collaborate with a hospital and do a paraclinical training in his school, college, and for the clinical training they can come to a hospital. Similarly, any technology companies can partner, like Philips can partner in training, so that there is a collaboration between different organizations coming together and executing the training
What are your
program.
thoughts on this?
Actually, one company can do everything. That's very much tough. So that's why ecosystem, as we mentioned, that comes very much important to create a real solution. That's one of the part. And the other solution meaning not only for patient, not only for doctor. I think, as I mentioned, that's community. That's more collaborating together to do that. And define some current issue, how we can adjust and fix even some IT usage or some new method like a mobile and mobility. I can explain later about that. So then lots of ways we may consider to adjust and upgrade our all kinds of services capability at this time. So but later on, I think I may explain later in just a little bit more detailed information, but that's a point. That's why we are working in this
We have
time.
one last question. We are closing the session. One last question.
I just want to add, this is actually a question to Daniel. So we talked about shared values and shared innovation. How companies like Philips are working on the open source architecture or open architecture of their products, so that, like you said, it's not one company or few companies who can actually help, especially in the public health deliveries. So what is your view on that, and how an individual innovator like me, right?
If you don't mind, can I pass the mic to you, Antonio? Can you share a little bit about what we do? Because this is the best answer right here, to be honest. There is a way.
We have another panelist added. You can come in.
I'll be conscious of time.
No.
I'll be conscious of time, and I'll say, come to our masterclass. It's starting in 20 minutes, and you'll hear more about it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Vishal, Dr. Vishal, we could take... There was already a hand up, so we'll take just one.
Sure.
Yes, sorry for the last minute. I was very impressed and motivated by Daniel's one statement that he is ready to take the losses for humanity. This is the people we need, especially for India. Big round of applause, please. Thank you. And yes, you will have a lot of challenges, but there are ways to crack. Partnership with, like-minded companies, like-minded, organizations, etc. I wish you all the best for that, and let's go for that. Thank you. My name is Venu Gopal. I have 23 years of pharmaceutical experience. I'm a champion of quality management system and computer system validation, 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, operational excellence. I thought this is an opportunity. I am looking for opportunities, so let me know. I'll be here till 5.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hiro. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Chandrika and Chandil. Thank you,
very
excellent
much.
panel. Thank you.
If I can request the panelists to stay on stage, I would like to give a token of appreciation.
Thank you.
Daniel, I would like to request you to hand over a token of appreciation to Dr. Vishal. The token is coming right here. Hiro-san would like to request you to hand over a token of appreciation to Dr. Chandrika Kambam. And Daniel, again, I would like to request you to hand over a token of appreciation to Dr. Chandil. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much. Chandrika, photo. They call for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you.